Origins tells the story of a molecular biologist who's trying to find evidence within the human eye, and really all eyes in general, in order to prove something that's supposed to change the way humans see the world completely. And this is considered to be a sci-fi movie, but in reality, to me, it felt more like a spiritual sci-fi, which I thought was really interesting. And also, this is one of those movies that it's best, whether you end up liking it or not, to just at least go into this movie knowing as little as possible. And that goes to the point that you probably shouldn't even see the trailer to this movie, because while it does have this very limited release, it goes through that cliche of having the trailer pretty much spoil everything in order for you to buy your ticket. But in reality, it ends up having that Dark Knight Rises effect, and where if you saw the Dark Knight Rises, and if you haven't seen it, well, I don't know what you're waiting for. Batman breaks his back, he's stuck in the Lazarus pit, and you're probably thinking, I wonder if he's going to get out. And obviously, if you saw the trailer, you know, well, there's a scene in the snow with him fighting Bane, so I'm pretty sure he's going to get out of this. This movie has that effect where even if you're not able to put the whole story with what you see in the trailer, you should, while you're watching the movie, be like, I'm pretty sure that's going to be solid because it reminds me of something I saw in the trailer. So again, best going into this movie, whether you like it or not, knowing as little as possible. But getting into the movie, just the surface before getting into it deeper, is that, again, this is a story about the eyes, which I thought was really cool and very interesting. And it stars Michael Pitt, who previously this year had a movie called Rob the Mob, and he's also very well known for Boardwalk Empire. I thought he did a really good job in this movie. You have Britt Marling, who's returning with the director who they previously did Another Earth, and they do this one again. And the cool thing about this movie is that it's actually supposed to be a prequel to a film that Mike Cahill, the director, wanted to make, originally called I. And the cool thing is that that movie is supposed to take place around 20 years after the events that happen in this film. However, it's sort of like what Gareth Evans did, I believe, with The Raid, and where he had the idea for The Raid 2, didn't have the budget for it, he's like, screw it, I'll make The Raid, and he made The Raid. The thing that this director did was that he didn't have the budget to make I, so he's like, well, I need to make something in between, why don't I just make something to expand this universe? And boom, I Origins came about. And I will say that while this movie has been getting a lot of polarizing, you know, reviews and stuff like that, I think that for the most part, it is actually really enjoyable, borderline being actually really, really good. However, I'm always very skeptical with these independent movies because, for one, they can be good because they usually have a strive for having, you know, better storytelling. At the same time, though, there are moments with independent films where they try to be very artsy and they just come across not being that. And I felt that that happened in the beginning of this movie, because while I'm watching it, I'm thinking, it's very slow, it's dragging on a little bit, it's got moments between characters which feel like they're just filler and they're trying too hard, they're acting very hipsterish, and it's not till like the 40-minute mark and where it actually starts picking up a little bit more. And I was surprised because I'm thinking, oh, you know, it's a good movie, but it's nothing really that's standing out. However, by the end of the movie, not only do a lot of the things that happen in the beginning, which I thought again felt like filler, like two characters just talking, end up coming full circle and making sense towards the end. All the little bits, all the conversations that they have, which I respect and I thought was really cool, even if some of them feel a little, you know, forced. I actually thought that it ended up being very, very enjoyable when you get to that climatic point and when you see all of these events occurring. Again, if you didn't get it spoiled for yourself, and it ends up being actually very enjoyable. Now, the problems that I have seen a lot of people have with this movie, which I actually think are the best parts of it, is that it deals with science and it deals with spirituality. And I like that fact that there have been many other movies which try to go that atheism, Christianity route. It tries to tackle the same thing, but without putting, you know, atheist and Christian. It just replaces it with, this is the scientist. Yes, you may, you know, put it back to being a atheist, and this is someone who's very spiritual, and you may say, yeah, they're a Christian, but it removes that sort of like, oh, playing for this specific team, and just leaves it with, let's have these two things confront each other, and not necessarily go against each other, but testing them both out. What does this have that makes sense? What does this have that makes sense? And which one really overcomes it? And I know that probably the biggest problem is that by the end of it, it feels like it's making a definitive decision on which one overcomes the other one, but in all reality, I feel like the movie does leave it up into interpretation for you to believe which one exists or which one is better than the other. But actually, I also think that the director is trying to build this world and where he wants to make it, you know, sort of a coexist type feeling, and where he's not necessarily saying that one's better than the other, but what he's doing with the film is trying to push each one to their limits, to their boundaries, and just trying to see which one may be correct or not. And even in the end, if there are parts that you don't agree with, because there are some moments where you may look at it and be like, oh, that's very cheesy on the religious side, or they're trying to be very scientifical, and in real world situations that doesn't make sense, that's where the fi in the sci-fi comes in, and you may see it as fiction. And as you see the movie progress, it's obviously trying to tell a story, but that can also be relatable in, you know, the real world. But it's still trying to be that sort of sci-fi movie, which it's tagged as you see the movie progress. And as you see the movie progress also, you see that they clearly get a better budget. Because in the beginning, they have those moments where it not only feels very independent-y, but they have the camera, like, focusing out, getting all fuzzy, very close shots. And then the second half, where I felt it got better, you have not only better locations, but they're actually using jibs, and they're using cranes, and it looks a lot better, it's a lot in focus, so that was really cool to see. And hopefully, seeing the bigger budget there, he's hopefully able to get that bigger budget to make that sequel, which we'll get into spoilers to talk about that. So definitely go see the movie, learn as little about it as possible, and let's talk spoilers. Going down through it, I like the imagery that they had in the movie. Even though the beginning I thought was, you know, very fuzzy here and there, and I didn't think it was the best, I like the little things that they had with him, you know, doing the whole numerology thing and seeing it all over the place. It took me a while to realize that the windows were supposed to be 11 after he got the 1111 from the 7-Eleven. But I also like the little aspects that they had, which were alluding to a lot of other films. There's the whole scene with the elevator obviously alludes to many other films, but to me, the one that stood out the most was the billboard with the eyes, which reminded me of Gatsby, definitely. But I also liked a lot of the quotes that they had in the movie, one of them being where the wife character, girlfriend character, is talking to him and saying, hey, you know, these worms, they don't have that perception to see light. So what if we are missing something because we're blinded and we don't have that sense to do that? And I thought, oh, that's really cool. There was another Dalai Lama quote that they had in there. I'm not sure how accurate that was, but it was also interesting as well how they were trying to flip the script over to him. And probably my favorite one that they had was when Britt Marling's character gets pregnant. They talk about, you know, building these, making the garage into a lab and testing the child. And then, of course, my favorite, which was, I can't wait to brainwash this baby with you. I thought that was hilarious. But going into, again, the fact that if you see this movie without having it spoiled for you, that whole scene with the elevator was amazing. When you look at it and you're like, oh, it's going to be very cliche, and she's getting on your nerves, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, they're okay. And then he feels it, and it's like, they didn't go the cliche route, but then all of a sudden, you see that she's not okay, and he feels the blood, and the fact that he's blind is just like, dang, that's really good. And the moments that they have continuing on when you see him go to India, which, of course, that's where the budget gets a lot better, but it's also where I actually connected it, obviously, reincarnation, that's what they're doing, this whole thing with the eye, and when you start seeing it with their kid, and the way that, you know, that it got mistaken for being that other guy, and he ends up realizing that all those tests were to show that this whole vision thing, this whole thing with the eyes, that it can be connected to other people, sort of reincarnation, and where it's carrying on these other people's, like, sort of ideas or souls into these other people who have the same type of eye structure that they may have had. However, the one part that I did think, you know, went a little bit overboard is where he ends up going to Boise, I believe where it was, just to go to the diner. I mean, he saw that it was real and it had a number there. He could have just called it up, and he's like, is there anything interesting? There's a farm. Oh, there's a farm? Hey, farm, is there any interesting things around there? Oh, this is the person who is a farmer? That's interesting. Boom, I got my answer from the comfort of my own home. However, it was better to see it because you get to see the wife and the dog and all of those things, so it was visually a lot better. However, the whole thing with India, again, dealing with reincarnation, Indians, you know, obviously believe in reincarnation. You have that whole scene with the elevator, which gets very emotional. It was also really cool to see. I know the actor better by Ethan from Lost, but it was cool to see him in there because not only did he serve the purpose of clearly being a cameo because he was in another Earth. I don't think it's supposed to be the same character, but also serving that religious side of it for a little bit. And then the parallel at the end of him not taking the elevator was because he was there, so then he takes the stairs. And then that whole full circle thing, again, if you did not get it spoiled for you, being able to have that revelation of when she flips out on the elevator, which again, may feel like the definitive thing of, hey, look, you see, it's obviously going the spiritual route. But in reality, I felt like it was saying, hey, you know, he took the test and he says, numbers don't lie. This is clearly all coincidence. That could have been another coincidence. You can go the route and say, you see, that clearly proves spirituality. Or you can go the route to say, hey, that was a coincidence, just like the numerology 11s, 11s, 11s that caused him to go somewhere. This just so happened to be another crazy coincidence that she may have had some traumatizing moments with elevators before that just so happened to connect with what he's going through, yada, yada, yada. So again, I feel like it can go both ways. Regardless, with all the interesting things that they had in the movie, whether it works for you or not, I thought it was very enjoyable, and hopefully you liked it too. If not, let me know if you didn't. But there was also that aspect in the after credits where you see where they're going to take it to the next level, and I thought that that's really cool. It's sort of like having Planet of the Apes where that whole thing is set up, and then going step backwards into where humans are still alive, and that seems like a foreign idea. I love the fact that he is already there in that world, and where it feels a sort of like a Minority Report type world, and where you see at the end in the after credits scenes that they're actually trying to scan historical figures in their eyes and trying to see if there's anybody today who matches that. And I don't even know what this dude is going to do with that story, how crazy it could be, but I cannot wait to see it. And I'm really happy that he was able to release this origin story to it, which is, I thought it was very phenomenal. So hopefully you liked it. If you did, let me know down below your thoughts on this movie. If you didn't, then definitely let me know down below. Don't bash me because I liked it, but let me know how you think the movie could have done better, or what you thought it did wrong, or what other movies you think are out there that deserve a better spotlight than this movie has, even though this movie is very independent and it doesn't have one. Let me know anything about this movie down below, as well as any other films, and until next time, I'll see you guys later.